Tape number 2, Side B, Lesson 16. Mary and Jeff are speaking about Japan.
Mary West and Jeff Martin are still on the plane from Copenhagen to Paris. They have just finished eating and are continuing their conversation.
How about some introductions? My name's Jeff Martin. I'm still a student, architecture at Northwestern University.
I'm Mary West, not a student anymore. I'm a working girl, except now I'm on vacation.
Were you working in Japan, Mary?
Yes, teaching English.
You said that Japan was very similar to the West in some ways and very different in other ways. What did you mean?
Well, you probably know that Japan is a very industrialized country, so the big cities are just like those in the West. Many people say that economically, Japan is the most powerful country in the world after the United States. But some Japanese customs are quite different from Western customs.
In what way?
In many ways. I think Japan has a group culture. Teamwork is very important. Everybody knows his place in society. We Americans are more individualistic, I think. For example, Americans often change jobs, but in Japan, people rarely do that. A man usually works for the same company until he retires.
I see. Do you speak Japanese, by the way?
Yes, I was born in Japan. I lived there until I was 8. And when I went to the university, I majored in Japanese literature.
That sounds very interesting. What other languages do you speak?
French, fluently, and a little German and Spanish.
Gee, I've been looking for a girl like you.
What do you mean?
I mean, you speak all those languages, and I only speak English. What are you going to do when we get to Paris?
I'm going straight to a hotel and have a long sleep.
And tomorrow?
I'm going to visit some friends. Why?
I was just thinking. You wouldn't like to have dinner with me tomorrow evening?
Are you inviting me as an interpreter or as a friend?
A friend, of course.
In that case, yes, I'd like to. We'd better fasten our seatbelts. We can arrange the date at the airport.
Now, answer these questions. Have Jeff and Mary just introduced themselves?
Yes, they have.
How did Mary describe herself?
She described herself as a working girl.
What did she say about industry?
She said Japan was a very industrialized country.
Are the big cities in Japan just like those in the West, or are they different?
They're just like those in the West.
What do some people say about Japan economically?
They say that Japan is the most powerful country in the world, after the United States.
Are some Japanese customs quite different from Western customs?
Yes, they are.
What kind of culture does Mary think Japan has?
She thinks it has a group culture.
Does that mean that teamwork is very important?
Yes, it does.
Does Mary think Americans are more individualistic?
Yes, she does.
Do Americans often change jobs?
Yes, they do.
What about people in Japan?
They rarely change jobs.
What are 2 reasons why Mary can speak Japanese?
She lived in Japan until she was 8, and she majored in Japanese literature.
What What other languages does Mary speak?
She speaks French fluently, and a little German and Spanish.
Was Jeff very impressed?
Yes, he was.
What would Jeff like Mary to do tomorrow evening?
He would like her to have dinner with him.
End of Lesson 16. Lesson 17. Jeff and Mary have dinner in Paris.
You remember that Jeff Martin and Mary West met on a plane between Copenhagen and Paris. They talked about Japan, and Jeff invited Mary to have dinner with him in Paris. Mary accepted his invitation. They arrived at de Gaulle Airport in Paris in the afternoon. It was raining. After her long flight from Japan, Mary was too tired to go sightseeing. She just wanted to go straight to her hotel and have a long sleep. She and Jeff took a bus from the airport to the city center, and they agreed to meet at the entrance to the Louvre Museum at 7 p.m. on the next day. When they got off the bus, they said goodbye, and Mary took a taxi to her hotel. It is now 10 minutes after 7 on the next evening. Jeff is waiting at the entrance to the Louvre when Mary arrives. Listen to their conversation.
Hello, Jeff. I'm sorry I'm late.
Good to see you again, Mary. Did you have a good rest?
Oh, yes. I slept more than 12 hours. I went to bed at 6 o'clock and I got up at 7 this morning. I feel much better now.
Good. Well, it's too early to have dinner yet. Would you like a drink before we go to a restaurant?
Fine. I know a nice cafe not far from here. The weather's nice enough to walk, don't you think? It'll only take us a few minutes.
Yes, it's much finer today than it was yesterday. I don't like Paris in the rain. It was too wet to go out. I stayed in my hotel and read a book. By the way, I forgot to ask you, how long do you plan to stay in Paris?
Just a couple of days. I went to see some French friends of mine today. They have a villa in Nice, and they're going there soon. They were kind enough to invite me to go with them. How long will you be here?
I plan to stay a week. Then I'll be going to London for another week. After that, I plan to fly to Vienna.
I'll be going to Vienna too, when I get back to Paris from Nice. I'm going to go by train, though. It'll be fun to travel by train again. It's easier to see the countryside.
That's true. We might be able to meet again in Vienna. Do you have an address there?
Yes, I'll be staying with some friends of my father's. I'll give it to you when we get to the cafe.
And I'll give you my address in the States in case we don't meet in Vienna.
Good. But you know I'll be in San Francisco, don't you? That's a long way from Detroit.
Maybe I'll get a job in San Francisco when I graduate. Is this the cafe?
Yes, this is it.
Now, answer these questions. Did Mary have a good rest?
Yes, she did.
What are they going to have before dinner?
They're going to have a drink.
What does Mary know near the Louvre?
She knows a nice cafe.
Where have some French friends of Mary's invited her?
They've invited her to their villa in Nice.
How long does Jeff plan to stay in Paris?
He plans to stay a week.
Then where will he go?
He'll go to London.
And after London, where will he go?
He'll go to Vienna.
Does Mary plan to go to Vienna too?
Yes, she does.
When will she be going?
She'll be going when she comes back from Nice.
Will she fly or go by train?
She'll go by train.
Why does she prefer the train?
Because it's easier to see the countryside.
Might Jeff and Mary meet again in Vienna?
Yes, they might.
Are they going to exchange addresses?
Yes, they are.
End of Lesson 17. Lesson 18. David sleeps late.
You have already heard a little about David Platts at the beginning of this book. Perhaps you remember something about him. He was born in East Germany. His family escaped to West Berlin, and they emigrated to the United States when David was 12. David is an engineer, and he has just graduated from college, and he is now in Europe. In fact, he is on a train going to Vienna. The train left Paris at 9 o'clock this morning, and David almost missed it. This is what happened. On his last night in Paris, David asked the clerk at the reception desk to wake him up at 7. The next morning, the clerk forgot to call David. When he woke up, he looked at his watch and got a big shock. It was 8:30. He had only half an hour to catch his train to Vienna. He jumped out of bed and dressed as quickly as he could. He threw his clothes into his suitcase, picked it up, and ran downstairs to the reception desk. He paid his bill and dashed out of the hotel into the street. It was 8:45, and he had to find a taxi. It was 9 o'clock when the taxi reached the station. It looks as if I've missed my train, David thought. He paid the driver and dashed into the station as fast as he could. With his ticket in one hand and his suitcase in the other, David rushed through the platform entrance. The train was just starting to move. He managed to get on just in time. He walked along the corridor until he found his compartment. It was empty, except for a young woman. It looked as if she was crying. Her eyes were red, and she was holding a handkerchief in front of her face. David put his suitcase on the luggage rack and sat down with a sigh of relief.
Now, answer these questions.
Where is David now?
He's in Europe.
Where exactly is he now?
He's on a train from Paris to Vienna.
What almost happened?
David almost missed the train.
What time did he ask the clerk to wake him up?
He asked him to wake him up at 7.
Did the clerk remember to call him, or did he forget?
He forgot to call him.
What time was it when David woke up?
It was 8:30.
How did David feel?
He was shocked.
Why was he shocked?
Because he had only half an hour to catch his train to Vienna.
What did he throw into his suitcase?
He threw his clothes into it.
Did he pick up his suitcase or leave it behind?
He picked it up.
Did he walk downstairs or did he dash downstairs?
He dashed downstairs.
What did he have to find quickly?
He had to find a taxi.
What time was it when the taxi reached the station?
It was 9 o'clock.
What was happening when he rushed through the platform entrance?
The train was just starting to move.
Did he manage to get on in time?
Yes, he did.
End of Lesson 18. Lesson 19. David meets Mary.
David Platz is on a train going from Paris to Vienna. As you know, he almost missed it because he slept late this morning. A young woman is sitting opposite him. David doesn't know her, but you do. Her name is Mary West. Mary looks as if she's crying. She's holding a handkerchief to her eyes. Listen.
Excuse me, could you do me a favor?
Yes, of course.
I've got something in my eye. I wonder if you could take it out for me.
Certainly. At least I'll try. I hope you don't think I'm a doctor.
David stands up and Mary gives him her handkerchief.
Which eye?
The left one.
David stands over Mary and looks into her left eye. He sees a small black speck. Very gently he removes it with a corner of the handkerchief.
Okay, I think it's out now. Does it feel better?
Oh yes, much better. Thank you very much.
Not at all. I'm always glad to help a lady in distress. You know, I thought you were crying. I thought you had just said goodbye to someone you love.
Oh no, I'm not that sentimental. Well, I'd better introduce myself. My name's Mary West.
Dave Platz. I'm from Chicago. Are you an American too?
Yes, but I was born in Japan.
Is that right? I was born in Germany, but my parents immigrated to the States when I was a kid. By the way, how did you know I wasn't French? You spoke to me in English.
I guess you look more like an American than a Frenchman.
And you don't think I look German?
I didn't think at all. Anyway, I suppose many Americans and Germans look alike. Tall, blonde, and a little bit fat.
Tall and blonde, yes, but I'm not fat.
I was only joking.
Do you know if they serve breakfast on this train? I didn't have time to eat this morning.
I think so. There's a dining car near this compartment.
Good. Would you like to join me?
I've had breakfast, but I'll have a cup of coffee with you.
Okay, let's go.
Well, you can guess what happened. David and Mary had a long talk. David invited Mary to have dinner with him in Vienna, and she accepted his invitation. He told her about his plans to visit his relatives in East Germany after his visit to Austria. They agreed to write to each other and to meet again when they went back to the States. But what about Jeff Martin? Who do you think Mary should marry, Jeff or David? Now, answer these questions. Why did David almost miss the train to Vienna?
Because he slept late this morning.
Who's sitting opposite him in the train?
A young woman is.
What's wrong with her?
She has something in her eye.
Which eye is troubling her?
The left one is.
What did David see in her left eye?
He saw a small black speck.
Did he take out the speck with his finger or with the corner of the handkerchief?
He took it out with the corner of the handkerchief.
Who is David always glad to help?
He's always glad to help a lady in distress.
Does Mary think David looks more like an American than a Frenchman?
Yes, she does.
What did David want to have?
He wanted to have breakfast.
Is Mary going to have breakfast with David or a cup of coffee?
She's going to have a cup of coffee with him.
Did David and Mary have a long talk?
Yes, they did.
What did David invite Mary to do?
He invited her to have dinner with him in Vienna.
What plans does David have after his visit to Austria?
He's going to visit his relatives in East Germany.
End of Lesson 19. Lesson 20. David has an unpleasant experience.
Listen.
David Platt said goodbye to Mary West in Vienna and took a plane to West Berlin. His plan was to visit his uncle and aunt and his cousins in East Berlin. East Berlin, of course, is in East Germany. But because David is an American citizen, it was easy enough for him to get permission to go there. He crossed the border at Checkpoint Charlie, the American nickname for the frontier post between West and East Berlin. David stayed at his uncle's apartment in East Berlin for 3 days, and his cousins showed him around. He thought it was an unpleasant place, and he did not enjoy sightseeing. He saw soldiers and policemen everywhere, and it seemed much poorer than West Berlin. The goods in the shops were more expensive, and they weren't the same quality as in the West. On the last day of his visit, David's uncle gave him a small package and asked him to deliver it to a friend of his in West Berlin. David put the package in his pocket and said goodbye to his uncle and his family. When David came out into the street, a policeman stopped him. "What were you doing in that house?" he asked in German. "I was visiting my uncle," David replied. "What is your name?" said the policeman. "John Smith," said David. "I'm an American. You have no right to stop me." The policeman came closer. "What have you got in your pockets? Show me," he said. David remembered the package in his pocket, and he decided to escape. He ran as fast as he could up the street. The policeman blew his whistle and ran after him. David ran around a corner into a small street. He could hear the policeman following him. "I must get to the border quick," he thought. Then he got a shock. It was a one-way street, and there was a wall almost 3 meters high at the end of it. But David was tall and strong. He ran toward the wall and jumped. He caught the top of the wall with his hands and climbed up. The policeman pulled out his gun and fired. David heard a bullet whistling past him. He jumped down on the other side of the wall and found himself in a small park. The policeman couldn't climb the wall, so David was safe for a short time. He ran across the park and came to the main road. He realized that he had to get to Checkpoint Charlie before the policeman telephoned the guards at the border. He hailed a taxi, and 5 minutes later he was at the East German side of the border. He walked calmly to the guardhouse and showed his passport. The guards looked at it carefully and let him pass. Just then the telephone rang, and one of the guards answered it. David started to run toward the West Berlin side. "Come back!" shouted the guard, but he was too late. David was already on the other side of the border. That evening, David wrote to Mary West in Vienna. "Today I had a very unpleasant experience," his letter began. Now, answer these questions. Where did David cross the border?
He crossed at Checkpoint Charlie.
Where did he stay in East Berlin?
He stayed in his uncle's apartment.
Who showed him around?
His cousins did.
Did David think it was a nice place or an unpleasant place?
He thought it was an unpleasant place.
Where did he see soldiers and policemen?
He saw them everywhere.
What did his uncle give David on the last day?
He gave him a small package.
Who did he ask David to deliver it to?
He asked him to deliver it to a friend of his in West Berlin.
Where did David put the package?
He put it in his pocket.
Who stopped him in the street?
A policeman did.
Was the policeman kind or aggressive?
He was aggressive.
Did the policeman want to search him?
Yes, he did.
What did David decide to do?
He decided to escape.
Was there a wall at the end of the street?
Yes, there was.
About how high was it?
It was almost 3 meters high.
Was David able to climb the wall?
Yes, he was.
What did the policeman do while he was climbing it?
He pulled out his gun and fired.
What did David hear whistling past him?
He heard the bullet.
What was there on the other side of the wall?
There was a small park.
What did David know the policeman would do?
He knew he would telephone the guards at the border.
How did David get to Checkpoint Charlie?
He got there by taxi.
What did he do at the guardhouse?
He showed his passport.
What happened just then?
The telephone rang.
What did David do?
He started to run.
What did the guard shout after him?
He shouted, "Come back!"
Did David escape to the west safely?
Yes, he did.
End of Lesson 20. Test after Lesson 20. Listen to this narrative about Sally Johnson. Then you will hear 10 statements about this narrative. If the statement is correct or true, mark the letter T. If it is wrong or false, mark the letter F. Listen to the narrative.
Sally Johnson's father used to be a diplomat, and Sally was born while her father was working at the American Embassy in Paris. She lived in France until she was 10 and learned to speak French fluently. When her father was transferred to Tokyo, Sally went to live with her aunt in the States. She attended school in the States and spent the summers with her family in Japan. When she graduated from college, she got a job as an English teacher in Paris.
Now begin.
Number 1.
Sally was born in France.
Number 2.
Sally learned to speak French fluently.
Number 3.
Sally went to Tokyo when she was 10.
Number 4.
Sally's father was transferred to Tokyo.
Number 5.
Sally went to the States.
Number 6.
Sally lived with her mother.
Number 7.
Sally attended school during the summer.
Number 8.
Sally spent the summers in Japan.
Number 9.
Sally spent the summers with her aunt.
Number 10.
Sally got a job as an English teacher in Paris.
End of test after Lesson 20. End of Side B.